Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds, hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy's Ted.
And today we're diving back into Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. This time we're looking at Chapter 3, going into Dwarves and Duergar.
Jump down the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy, the newsletter, get weekly gaming tips, as well as learn how to game with us.
Alright, Chapter 3, Dwarves and Duergar, or however you want to say it. I've heard it said several different ways. So we basically get into kind of like the origin of the Duergar and their conflict with dwarves. Hill dwarves, mountain dwarves is kind of where it opens up. I actually felt a little bad for them when I read that part. I was like, you know, the dwarves might have been kind of dicks to them.
And, you know, that was kind of my thought as well. So, like, part of me wants to, like, you know, have this, play a game and have this unveiling that it's really Moradin and the dwarves who
were wrong.
Who were wrong and be like, look, the Duergar got misled and imprisoned. And you're like, yep, too bad. Sucks
Enslaved.
to you.
Yeah, it was your fault. This is some, like, epic level victim shaming, victim blaming here, I feel like.
I agree. I thought this was a really, really interesting and enjoyable chapter to read. It inspired me to talk about, like, Moradin created the first dwarves out of, like, metal and stone. So I'm like, I would want to have that as some kind of celestial encounter. Like, those original dwarves. Like, they're not flesh, they're metal, they're stone.
I kind of feel like that was, like, a big part of that is, like, the Dwarven Pantheon, really. Mm-hmm. Is those are the dwarves that were raised up. It kind of goes on to say that later on. Mm-hmm. Like I said, the opening is about the conflict, how the dwarves were made, basically how Duergar pretty much lived to basically try and overthrow Moradin, the dwarves, and kill mind flayers. It is kind of the gist of it. It goes into the dwarves and why they are the way they are and how they perceive the world. And for them, it's always about leaving legacy, whether it's through a finely crafted item or the next generation.
When looking at this section, what I liked was it's like they create stuff as they're prone to do. They're dwarves. But the dwarves who create something of, like, major significance and value, like, they treat it as like a child. It's like, you know, I'm going to protect it. I'm always going to know where it is and all this stuff. And I'm like...
Even to the point
wow.
where if they give it away as a gift, like, they're very serious about the gift receiver respecting it the way they do.
Right. You know,
I think Mordenkainen in one of his footnotes uses a word to kind of describe the dwarves, and it's neurotic. He might not be too far off.
Dwarves pursue perfection. This chase is foolish, as there's no one pure truth of anything. Everything that they do is for their clan, and you're given roles. And we get into, like, this whole thing, and that, like, they don't treat marriage the way other races do. Like, typically it's set up by a clan head, and they make, you know, unions that are going to benefit the clan above everything else.
It's kind of funny too to read that, because we just in your game had a marriage, right? Literally, we're going to be tonight when we play. We're going to be in the aftermath of that marriage, that union, with my dwarf character who's pursued another dwarf. And I literally said, she's got things that I want to bring back to the clan. And I must be actually really a dwarf, because before this book came out, I totally pursued this courtship from that standpoint.
And I felt like, you know, I had some dwarfish attributes as, like, the courtship ceremony. Like, you guys had to make and present something to each other. And while there wasn't anything in here, I felt that was true to clan. Is like, okay, to offer, you know, respect and significance, I'm going to make something as part of it. So I thought that was very fitting.
So, you know, that all came about nicely. It was kind of like cool to see what we had made up in our own games get reinforced in this book made by a bunch of professionals.
Indeed.
So, you know, most of this is going on to talk about, like, dwarven life and how they do things, and they're very societal, and how they interact with each other. One of the more interesting things is they actually have a section, Dwarves in the Multiverse. So it talks about dwarves in the Greyhawk setting, dwarves in the Forgotten Realms setting.
It's got dwarves in Dragonlance, Yeah, because, how can you mention dwarves and not get into gully dwarves?
Well, yeah, and that's where you would talk about them. So that was really cool. So it talks about the differences, and there isn't much difference. Mountain dwarves are mountain dwarves, and hill dwarves are hill dwarves, except for gully dwarves. There ain't nothing like a gully dwarf.
Yeah, it's like, you feel bad for them. It's like, most dwarves consider them a form of vermin, unsuitable even as servants.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh man, poor gully dwarves. So the next section we get into Dwarven Religion, and they talk more about Morden and Abathor and, Baranar, True Silver, Clangeddin, Silverbeard. And then it's like, okay, well, there are other deities. And just like the other sections with, we saw with the elves, they have the Dwarf Gods, their providence, the suggested domains, the common symbols, and the suggested alignments.
Now, they only list a couple of them. Then they do kind of a vague overview of a bunch of them in like a paragraph. And then they actually go to the dual role of Abathar. And Abathar is like the evil dwarf god, right? And I thought that section is not super long, but I thought it was really interesting in the sense that, like, it talks about this is like the embodiment of all which is wrong with dwarves and dwarven personalities in society. But at the same time, there's this duality of this is actually what actually pushes dwarven society forward. So that dichotomy is, I found really interesting, and it wasn't something I was expecting from this chapter.
Right. Speaking of things not expected, because dwarves typically tend to hold lots of treasures, not only things that they've acquired from elsewhere, but things they themselves have made, dragons have the ability to understand this as well, and they'll sometimes target dwarven strongholds with their minions or if they're able to get in there. So it goes into the different chromatic dragons and their philosophies, therein, but almost all of them are like, they're really going to deal with dwarves, directly because of this and that and the other thing. So I found this section pretty amusing.
But if they do.
Right. Yeah.
There's a bit of that. There's a sidebar in Dwarves and Now. Of course, we have, not only are the dragons counted in the enemy section, so are giants, orcs, and duergar, of course, and how they all kind of relate to dwarves and the dwarven stronghold. And from there, it goes into, the different societies of dwarves, how they collapsed, dwarf adventurers, and then from there it jumps right into duergar. And duergar get a nice little section, which actually I really enjoyed their section, to be honest with you. The pieces on their gods, the three rules of conduct that duergar live by.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this section as well, and we kind of gave our duergar in our campaign setting a bit of a boost up with the city that they run, and some of those, again, concepts that we've fostered in our game really fit well with the duergar mentality.
So the three rules of conduct: our pockets are never full, our fight is never done, our resolve is never shaken. There's this awesome sidebar about Ludegar, which is the deity of the duergar, and how the story about how he freed the duergar essentially, and allied himself with the powers of hell, Asmodeus.
Right. So it's a really great story. It doesn't take long to read, but he descended into the hells and walked out of there better off than he was going in, and freed his people. So it was really awesome. We also talk about the two primary religions, Deep Dora and Ladagur. We get to see what's inside a duergar stronghold. We get the power of the mind, which talks about psionics. We also learn, really awesomely, that to duergar, quality isn't all that important, but quantity is. So, when they're going to make a longsword, they're going to make a standard, plain, boring longsword. There's no artistic expression. There's no flowery designs or engravings. They care about it functioning.
Yeah, functionality over form. Now, even though it does say quantity over quality, I think it's a bit of a misnomer reading through it, because it's not like they don't care and they don't want it to be functional and be it be a quality piece. They just don't make it pretty.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I was getting at. Like, they're not going to put any of this extra stuff in it. They are going to make it, and they're going to make it like any dwarf would in its capabilities. But the extra effort into going to make it look better, that's beneath them. They'd rather spend that time making another one. So,
well, kind of speaking to that, it reminds me of a section earlier in the chapter where it talks about dwarven merchants are laughing because they got over on the human farmer because the shovel they sold him is only going to last decades and not centuries. And the farmer is like, wow, this is great. This is a shovel that's going to last me a lifetime. So like the dwarves it talks about dwarves trying to get the best deal, and even the ones that are slightly unscrupulous, they're still selling goods that are better than anything that most other civilizations are going to produce.
Yeah, I found that section as well. So then we get into duergar characters.
Well, before we go there is one thing I would definitely say we should touch on.
The ale.
The sidebar for duergar and ale.
Now, in the first section where we talk about dwarves and ale, we see that, like, while dwarves will get drunk, they wind up having, like, memories or visions of the past when they're drinking, and they can learn about all that great stuff. So when you get a duergar drunk, it's not going to go well.
Yeah, because they do the same thing. So they actually abstain from drinking and getting intoxicated because it triggers one of two responses, the fight or flight response, which neither of them are particularly pleasant for the duergar or maybe the other people around that duergar.
So they might remember, the horrors that the duergar as a race went through, and they flee and they hide until they're no longer drunk, or they totally go apeshit crazy and start attacking everything around them. Pretty awesome.
Right, we get a little sidebar on psionic awakening for duergar, then we get the character traits for duergar. So, I mean, we've seen duergar before presented in Sorko's Adventures,
right.
So we're getting it again. And then we get into dwarf tables.
So we got tables just like with the elves for both the regular dwarves and the duergar. So we have group composition, who's the leader, special allies, the purpose of travel, special circumstances. Then we got into the clan. We have clan status, notable trait, clan vocations. Then in the world, you have adventurer story hooks. You have dwarf quirks. We get into the duergar tables and their raiding parties. You've got the composition, the leader, the special allies, just like the other ones. Purpose of the raid, special circumstances. Then we get into the clan. We have the clan names, the clan status, the clan's notable trait, which could be is secretly controlled by mind flayers.
Again,
it's one of those things that totally sucks. Then you wind up with duergar in the world. You get adventure hooks, and you got duergar quirks. You don't talk unless you absolutely must. You could go in a variety of directions with this, but all told, Nerdarchy loves dwarves. This was a fabulous chapter.
I think we get like 19 pages. So far, it's the shortest chapter yet, but it's only chapter 3. We got more coming. Next we're going to dive into chapter 4, Gith and their endless war. Oh no, it was a good read. It was a good section. I actually enjoyed the insights into the duergar a lot more than some of the other stuff. It was really cool, and it actually gave me a little bit of perspective and maybe changed how I feel about them a little bit.
So, what do you guys think? Have you read Dwarves yet? Did we tell you anything you didn't already know? Down in the comments below, why don't you let us know. While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
While you're down there, you'll also find a link to Amazon, so you can pick up your own copy of Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.